Shalom and welcome back. You guys, you've made it this far, so don't give up on me now. Studying the commandments is what separates the talkers of Israel from the walkers. When I first woke up to the truth of who I am, I searched and searched for guidance in the commandments, and I was one of the ones who thought there was only 10. But I could not find anyone who was breaking the laws down so I could understand what they are, how many there are. So I want to make sure you guys don't have to struggle for knowledge like I had to. This is my gift to you, taking you on this journey with me. Some of you have asked if I have a degree in the subject. I did attend seminary school, and yes, I do have 2 master's degrees, one in business and one in theology. So yes, I am educated in this subject, but remember, my true education came when I began independent study outside of the university, because most Christian-based schools are giving you the Christian version or interpretation of the scriptures, which I firmly believe are incorrect. So although I do have a degree, I'm still very much learning, like you guys, the true revealing of the scriptures, and I'm having a good time doing it. I don't know about you guys, but there's a release that comes with learning the laws. What's crazy is many of us have been Christians for years and never once read any of them. How can a church call itself a ministry and hide the commandments, right? See, we're waking up now and we're not afraid to ask these questions. Remember, we do this because we're commanded to. We study the laws because we're commanded to learn the commandments and teach them to others. So I want to thank you guys for the support and encourage you to keep on this journey with me. As we now get into the study of the laws of forbidden foods, starting with law number 176, to examine the signs of animals to distinguish between kosher and non-kosher. So the first law is to be mindful of the food you're eating. We're commanded to take heed to what we put into our mouths. Don't just consume anything. Many of the illnesses, the diseases, even cancers we're experiencing today is from years and years of eating food that was never meant to be eaten, chemically processed and chemically preserved, genetically modified in order to multiply it for greater profit. Our fruit is sprayed with chemicals to keep it alive long enough to sell, but with no regard to what those chemicals do to our bodies once we consume it. A cut of meat is no longer a cut of meat anymore. Some cuts are bits and pieces of meat glued together and shaped to form what you think is a cut of meat, but it's not. We're living in a world that cares more about profit than your health. And I don't want to get off the subject, but I do want to say the same when it comes to medication. They have a medicine for every human condition known to man. And these medicines have more side effects than curing effects. And we have to choose between having clearer skin or having suicidal thoughts. They're making you choose between minimizing your depression and kidney disease. In other words, I'll give you this pill. It'll make your skin clear up, but it'll make you want to kill yourself. And then when they talk about the side effects, they'll say things like some cancers have happened, which is a nice way of saying this medication causes cancer. Topped with the attractive actors walking down the beach holding hands and the cheerful music, they are manipulating you for financial gain. Their meds are killing you, but they're not taking them back to the lab to make them better. They're saying, oh, well, if we tell them the side effects, we've done our part. So bottom line, we must watch what we put into our mouths, medication and food. And it is very likely if we ate what the Most High instructed in the laws, many diseases we suffer from would not exist. So let's continue. Laws number 177, 178, and 179 are to examine the signs of the fowl, the fish, and the locust to determine if they are kosher to eat or not. So some fish are edible, some are not. Some birds are edible, and some are not. And the same with the locusts. Locusts are grasshoppers. I've never had a grasshopper, but apparently some are kosher and some are not. Law number 180, not to eat non-kosher animals. Leviticus 11:4 says, nevertheless, these shall ye not eat of them that chew the cud or divide the hoof. Divided hoof refers to any animal with a split hoof that divides into 2 toes. Chewing the cud is the process of eating, swallowing, regurgitating, and eating again. If an animal does either of these, they are forbidden. However, if an animal does both of these, they are okay to eat. It says in verse 4, the camel is unclean because it chews the cud, but it doesn't have a divided hoof. And verse 5 says the coney is unclean because it chews the cud, but it doesn't have the divided hoof. The cow, however, has split hooves and also chews its cud, so they are okay to eat. Verses 4 through 7 forbids us to eat the camel, the coney, the hare, and the rabbit, and swine, which is pig. Law number 181, it says not to eat non-kosher fowl, based on Leviticus 11, verse 13, and it says, and these are they which ye shall have an abomination among the fowls. They shall not be eaten, they are an abomination. In verse 13 through 20, it includes the following birds: the eagle, the ossifrage, osprey, vulture, raven, owl, the nighthawk, cormorant, swan, pelican, stork, heron, lapwing, the bat, and fowls that creep on all fours. Law number 182, not to eat non-kosher fish. This command is more specifically found in verse 9, which reads, these shall ye eat of all that are in the waters, whatsoever has fins and scales, in the waters, in the seas, and in the rivers, them shall ye eat. All other animals of the sea are forbidden, including shellfish. Law number 183 says not to eat non-kosher flying insects. It's based on Deuteronomy 14, verse 19, and it says, and every creeping thing that flies is unclean unto you. They shall not be eaten. This law is regarding flying insects. You can read about them in Leviticus 11, verse 21 also, where we see that indeed some flying creeping things are considered clean. It reads, yet these may ye eat of every flying creeping thing that goes upon all fours, which have legs above their feet, to leap upon the earth. And verse 22 goes on to list the following flying insects: locust, beetle, and grasshopper. These are the only kosher insects that we can eat. According to verse 23, all other flying creeping things which have 4 feet shall be an abomination unto you. Law number 184 says not to eat non-kosher creatures that crawl on land. Leviticus 11:41 says, and every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth shall be an abomination. It shall not be eaten. Verse 29 is a better reference for the command regarding creeping things. It lists the following animals: the weasel, the mouse, the tortoise, the ferret, chameleon, which is a type of lizard, the snail, and the mole. Law number 185 says not to eat non-kosher maggots. Leviticus 11:44 reads, neither shall ye defile yourselves with any manner of creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. Per Maimonides' list of 613, the command here is not to eat non-kosher maggots. However, I place 2 asterisks here because the scripture says any manner of creeping things, which I'm sure includes more than just maggots. So this law should be changed to include any manner of creeping things that creep upon the earth. Law number 186, not to eat worms found in a fruit on the ground. It's based on Leviticus 11, verse 42. Whatsoever go upon the belly, and whatsoever goes on all fours, or has more feet among all creeping things that creep upon the earth, them ye shall not eat, for they are an abomination. This law is an attempt to include the worm in with law number 185. That law covers any creeping thing, meaning animals that crawl on their belly, including the maggot and the worm. This law did not need to be created, as law number 185 covers all belly commuting animals. Law number 187, not to eat creatures that live in water other than fish. It's based on Leviticus 11, verse 43, which reads, ye shall not make yourselves abominable with any creeping thing that creepeth, neither shall ye make yourselves unclean with them, that ye should be defiled thereby. I have 2 asterisks by this law because the scripture it is based on does not address the law at hand. The actual scriptural reference is found in Leviticus 11:12. Whatsoever has no fins nor scales in the waters, that shall be an abomination unto you. So this law's scriptural reference needs to be changed. But since we're back on this subject, what does it mean to only eat fish with fins and scales? It means not to eat shellfish, oysters, crabs, etc. Any other fish that doesn't have fins and scales. So we are to examine the fish, looking at law number 178, examine the fish, see the fins, see the scales, and then we'll know if we are to eat it or not. It's pretty simple. Simple to understand, not always simple to do for those of us who love seafood. Notice I included myself in that statement. Some of these laws will be hitting me just as hard as they hit you. Doesn't make them any less of a commandment though. So we have to stay obedient. You guys pray for me, okay? Pray for me on this one. Moving on. Law number 188, not to eat the meat of an animal that died without ritual slaughter. It's based on Deuteronomy 14, verse 21, and it says, "You shall not eat of anything that died of itself. Thou shalt give it to the stranger that is in thy gates, that he may eat it." The command here is not to eat meat of any animal that died without ritual slaughter. It is not kosher. Ritual slaughter is a mandatory method for slaughtering animals for food. It involves a single cut to the throat, leading to the loss of blood and then death. That's how the animal has to die. If it dies any other way, it is not kosher. So if you're not a professional butcher, you probably don't really want to picture all of that. So we will continue on to law number 189. But first, I do want to remind you guys that these fast food places that sell burgers on a regular, million-dollar companies selling you food are all about their profit. While we'd like to think quality is at the top of their list, it may not be. And the best way to make a profit is to buy or produce for little and sell for much. They may be getting their produce from slaughterhouses that do not slaughter in a kosher manner because it's cheap. They make their products and sell them to us in a drive-through, and we have no idea how that meat was killed, when it was killed, if it's even cow. So be careful, you guys, the food you eat when you eat out. Now let's move on to law number 189, not to benefit from an ox condemned to be stoned. It's based on Exodus 21, verse 28. If an ox gore a man or a woman, that they die, then the ox shall be surely stoned, and his flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall be quit. So we're commanded not to eat the meat of an ox that was stoned to death, or any animal that died in that manner. Law number 190, not to eat meat of an animal that was mortally wounded. Exodus 21, verse 30, but more specifically found in verse 31, and it says, "And ye shall be holy men unto me, neither shall ye eat any flesh that is torn of beasts in the field. Ye shall cast it to the dogs." So we are commanded not to eat the meat of an animal that has been wounded by other animals. Law number 191, not to eat a limb torn off of a living creature. Deuteronomy 12:23 says, "Only be sure that thou eat not the blood, for the blood is the life, and thou mayest not eat the life with the flesh." Per Maimonides, the command here is not to eat a limb torn off of a living creature. That is not correct. The command is not to eat the blood of an animal with the meat of an animal. So I've placed one asterisk next to this one because the law regarding limbs has to be omitted because its scriptural reference says nothing about limbs. We do, however, see that in the next law, law number 192, it does address blood. Law number 192 says not to eat blood, based on Leviticus 3:17. "It shall be a perpetual statute for your generations throughout all of your dwellings, that ye eat neither fat nor blood." And it's also mentioned in Deuteronomy 12, verse 23, to avoid blood. Law number 193, not to eat certain fats of clean animals, based on the same scripture. Moving on to law number 194, not to eat the sinew of the thigh, based on Genesis 32:32. "Therefore the children of Israel eat not of the sinew which shrank, which is upon the hollow of the thigh unto this day, because he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh in the sinew that shrank." The Israelite nation is commanded not to eat the sinew of the hip of any animal, because this is where Jacob's thigh was touched, in the sinew of the hip. The sinew is the tendon which joins the muscle and the bones together. This part of the meat is to be removed during preparation. Law number 195, not to eat milk and meat cooked together. Exodus 23, verse 19, it says, "Thou shalt not seethe a kid in his mother's milk." And law number 196 says not to cook meat and milk together. Based on Exodus 34, verse 26, "Thou shalt not seethe a kid in his mother's milk." I've placed 2 asterisks by these 2 laws because you see the scripture is clearly saying not to cook an animal in its own mother's milk. Therefore, we're not to eat an animal cooked that way. However, Judaism's list sums it all up as don't cook meat and milk together, when that's not what the scripture says. We are not to cook an animal in the milk of its own mother. If that milk belongs to an animal that is not its mother, it's okay to cook it that way and to eat it that way. So the true commands here for law number 195 is not to eat meat cooked in its own mother's milk, as the scripture says. And for law number 196, not to cook meat in its own mother's milk. So now that we see the true laws here, the purpose of these 2 commands was based on the purpose of the milk, to nourish the kid or the young animal with its mother's milk. That's the purpose of any mother's milk. So we see in Leviticus 22 verse 27 where it's prohibited to sacrifice an animal that hasn't been with his mother for at least 7 days. And in Leviticus 22 verse 28 that we are not to slaughter both the mother and the kid animal on the same day. So it's a law about compassion for the mother-offspring relationship and bond. Boiling that kid in its own mother's milk was not proper or kosher. Moreover, some say this was a pagan practice that the Most High wanted the Israelites to avoid. Law number 197, not to eat bread from new grain before the Omer. Law number 198, not to eat parched grains from new grain before the Omer. And law number 199, not to eat ripened grains from the new grain before the Omer. All based on the same scripture. Leviticus 23:14, and ye shall eat neither bread, nor parched corn, nor green ears, until the selfsame day that ye have brought the offering unto the Most High. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations and all of your dwellings. The 3 commandments are not to eat bread, parched grains, or ripened grains from the new grain of the very first harvest barley, which is the Omer. The Omer or sheaf was to be taken to the temple as the first fruits offering. Leviticus 23 verse 5 says, when ye have come into the land which I give you, and shall reap its harvest, then you shall bring the sheaf. So this tells us that these 3 laws are one of those we really can't keep. There is no temple or harvest for us to bring to a temple. And while we can't keep this particular command anymore, the point of these 3 laws were to honor the first fruits by not eating them. So we don't have the first fruits to honor him with or to avoid eating an observance of these laws, but we can remember why they are indeed commandments. Law number 200, not to eat fruit of a tree during its first 3 years. Based on Leviticus 19:23, which reads, and when ye shall come into the land, and shall have planted all manner of trees for food, then ye shall count the fruit thereof as uncircumcised. 3 years shall it be as uncircumcised unto you. It shall not be eaten of. We are commanded not to eat the newly produced fruit of a tree in its first 3 years. In the 4th year, the fruit is to be offered to the Most High as first fruits. And in the 5th year, the fruit can be eaten. This law in its context was regarding the Israelites establishing new produce in the land of Canaan upon their arrival. So in regards to the specific command in the land, no, it cannot be kept. We have no land and no harvest. Now let's look at the principle. Because this is not just about taking an offering to a temple, and since there's no temple, there's nothing to take. This is about producing fruit. We're looking specifically at those first 3 years prior to the first fruits offering in the 4th year. We see that we can't really eat the fruit until the 4th year, or we'll say the 5th because the 4th belonged to the Most High. Why couldn't we eat the fruit within the first 3 years? This is the principle behind produce. For the first 3 years, they were commanded not to eat the fruit from these trees because it was considered uncircumcised or unclean. They would not allow the fruit to ripen, but they would remove it and throw it away. There's a reasoning behind this. Gardeners will tell you that doing this actually causes the tree to grow stronger and bear more fruit the following year. They found this to be the case, and it has also been confirmed in studies that fruit produced in the first 3 years is not as nutritious. And here's the Most High instructing the Israelites, something it took science generations to figure out. Law number 201, not to eat diverse seeds planted in a vineyard. based on Deuteronomy 22, verse 9. Thou shalt not sow thy vineyard with diverse seeds, lest the fruit of thy seed which thou hast sown and the fruit of thy vineyard be defiled. Again, while this law pertains specifically to the Israelites in the land, this command is about principle, and it reigns true today when it comes to produce. We are commanded not to sow different seeds together, as it becomes defiled. If the produce from that seed is defiled, this means that we are also commanded not to eat foods produced from hybrid manipulation. Seeds planted together are considered an improper mixing of dissimilar things. This was done to preserve order and distinction. Today, much of the food we see is genetically modified or mixed species, causing hybrid foods. In hybrid foods, where more than one food is combined to create a new produce, their molecular structure has been altered in such a way that they no longer have nutritional value. I don't know if you guys ever heard of a Dr. Sevi. He taught a lot about hybrid foods and how we shouldn't eat them, not only because we're commanded not to per the scripture, but they have no nutritional value. So again, the Most High has instructed us on something that science doesn't discover for generations. So the command says, foods grown from mixed seeds becomes defiled. We will look at a list of hybrid foods, but first our final 7 laws. Law number 202, not to eat untithed fruits, based on Leviticus 22:15, and they shall not profane the holy things of the children of Israel, which offer unto the Most High. Law number 203, not to drink wine poured in service to idols, based on Deuteronomy 32:37, which says, and he shall say, where are their gods, their rock in whom they trusted, which did eat the fat of their sacrifices and drank the wine of their drink offerings. So we're commanded not to partake in offerings made to false gods. Looking at 5 laws that pertain to slaughtering. Law number 204, to ritually slaughter an animal before eating it, based on Deuteronomy 12:21. If the place which the Most High has chosen to put his name there be too far from thee, then thou shalt kill of thy herd and of thy flock, which the Most High has given thee, as I have commanded thee. Law number 205, not to slaughter an animal and its offspring on the same day, based on Leviticus 22:28. We talked about these 2 laws earlier. Law number 206, to cover the blood of a slaughtered beast or fowl with earth, based on Leviticus 17:13. Any Israelite or any foreigner residing among you who hunts an animal or bird that may be eaten must drain out the blood and cover it with earth. Number 207, not to take the mother bird from her children, based on Deuteronomy 22:6. If you come across a bird's nest beside the road, either in a tree or on the ground, and the mother is sitting on the young or on the eggs, do not take the mother with the young. Another law based on compassion. And law number 208, to release the mother bird if she was taken from the nest, based on Deuteronomy 22, verse 7. You may take the young, but be sure to let the mother go, so that it may go well with you, and you may have a long life. We've reviewed 208 laws. We've seen 13 laws that need to be omitted because they were repeats or false additions, 25 laws that need to be changed to fit their scriptural reference, and 9 laws that can no longer be kept today. So although we've reviewed 208 laws so far, there are only 195 true laws within them. I want to thank you guys for watching and studying with me today. As promised, I will leave you with a list of hybrid foods, many of which we think are natural but are indeed mixed and or modified foods. Feel free to follow along with my studies on my blog site, riseofthechosen.blogspot.com. Until next time, this is Judaiah. Shalom.